Welcome, everybody, to another Bangers and Classics podcast. Amazingly, we're still going with me, James Ruppert, and him, David Malloy. Hello, David. What's occurring at your end?
Oh, hello, James. Yeah, lots occurring. Nothing of any, earth-shaking proportions, I'm afraid. I've got a couple of stories to tell you. We were talking about Unimogs last week.
Yeah,
Well, I spotted another one, a nice white one with a crane on the back. That was one thing I saw.
yeah,
Only other car spot I can remember. It was a 1991 Audi Coupe, the more rounded one that came after
yeah.
obviously the one that spawned the Urquattro. This one was a normally aspirated front-wheel drive one that seemed to be used as a daily. Which was nice to see. It looked in fair condition too. But this pales into insignificance compared to what happened the other day. I'm going to be in serious trouble for telling you this story, but it's got to be told. We've bought sort of slightly venerable Jeep Cherokee as a workhorse, and 3 or 4 nights ago decided to take it out for a spin. And my wife said, "Okay, I'll drive it. Fine, great." She loves 4x4s. I don't like them at all. Anyway, we get into the car and we pull away, and it's juddering like crazy. It's going nowhere. It's just, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong. I don't know if it's the clutch. I don't know if it's the clutch. Something wrong with it. I pull over. So we'd literally driven about 50 yards from the house. Swap seats. I get in, pull away. Nothing wrong with it. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. You're imagining it. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. So drove into the village, round the square, and we changed positions again. Gets back in the car. And yes, again, it's juddering and shuddering all over the place and not going. I think she actually stalled it this time. There's something seriously wrong with this car. And then it dawned on her. She was using the brake as the accelerator pedal.
Well, it's a mistake we can all make, David. I don't
Not
know why you're
really.
being so harsh.
Oh, what, you think I'm going to miss a chance like that to slag her off? Come on. This is gold dust. As I say, she loves 4x4s. I really don't like them at all. And I'm the one that can drive it. There we go. But I'm sure she won't make that mistake again. And I'm sure she'll be delighted I'm sharing this with our listeners. But you know what? Sometimes you've just got to walk on the edge, just walk on the edge of the precipice and say, you know what? To heck with it. Publish and be damned. So I'm probably damned, actually. But yeah, so that was one thing. Other thing was we had a message from a chap on Twitter, a chap who's, I believe his name is Mark Pointer, but he goes under the name of Mechanically Propelled. Mark generously said that he enjoys the podcast, and we're glad to hear that, Mark, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
He then said, obviously, he doesn't know what you or I look like, and he hears Martin Freeman talking cars with Duncan Bannatyne. Now, I presume you're the Martin Freeman chap, James. Again,
Well,
maybe I'm wrong.
I thought I was old Dunk there for the minute. There you go.
Well, I thought you were too, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're probably more Martin Freeman than me. Though I'm not really like Duncan Bannatyne either, I have to say. I mean, obviously, you being a sort of terribly sophisticated chap, I would imagine that you would be. Well, you could be either of them, really, couldn't you?
Well, I don't know about that. I haven't got as much money as Duncan, which is a shame. Um, I don't know. I've never had the Martin Freeman comparison ever before, but maybe I do. Maybe there is a career for me as a sidekick. Maybe playing a doctor on a TV show, and you could be the Sherlock-like character,
Oh,
David.
God.
There you go.
Yeah, more like Barrett
Scottish
Holmes and shit.
Sherlock. Yeah.
Well, he was written by a Scotsman, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, however, I don't think I look like Duncan Bannatyne. Not too sure that I sound like him. But yeah, well, thanks for the comparison anyway.
Yeah, any comparison is okay.
They're not unflattering, James. Let's be
No,
honest.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so at all. He could do a lot worse than that.
You could do actually, yeah.
And be a lot more accurate, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, the good thing he actually doesn't know what we look like, and obviously in real life we are fairly terrifying. But there you go.
Oh yeah, terrifying. Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of my replies to him on this chat on Twitter, and it's a true story. My wife said that in my last driving license photo, not the current one, I looked like a serial killer. There is a reason for that. It's not because I'm a serial killer, obviously. Well, I'm not going to admit that on the podcast. No, it's I have trouble making eye contact with things, and I had eye surgery when I was 19. Still some after effects of that. Sounds like a bass guitar in the background, James.
No, that's quite an old tractor going past, and it's a proper old Ford one, and it's very rusty and fantastic, and it's got a trailer on it, and yeah, that's quite impressive.
Yeah. It sounded like the introduction to, I don't know, Frank Zappa song or something. I did look like a serial killer in that photograph. So my story about my wife and the Cherokee is revenge for her saying that to me.
Yeah,
But however, she's not the one who banned me from dancing with her, but we're not going to go into that.
quite right.
I got,
Um,
I got banned from dancing because I'm so blooming awful at it. Imagine that, eh?
yeah.
Shocking. Terrible. Anyway, what cars have you seen?
Well, I'm obviously very light on my toes, David. I can do a pirouette with the best of them. But yeah, I saw several interesting cars this week. Just for you, I saw a Lotus Elan Series One, and that was in. It looked as though it was used in like time trials. It was quite an amazing thing to see, and there was a Union Jack sort of sticker on the door, but it was wonderfully scruffy. So it was a properly used little car, which was really great to see. Just before that, I saw a Golf GTI Mark II. That'll
Mm,
come and be more relevant as the podcast progresses. But it was again, it's nice to see older cars being used, and that looked as though it was a daily driver with a very happy driver in the seat. And the other thing was quite a weird thing. It was a Mad Max Mondeo. Somebody had taken a Mark II Mondeo, sprayed it black, I think over to so you couldn't see the rust, and put all sorts of wings and aerials on it and all sorts. And so it really did look like a Mad Max Interceptor, which was quite funny, and it made a bit of a noise as it went past. And I suppose that is it a banger? Is it a classic? We're not quite sure what it was, but it was very
yeah.
interesting to see. But
I'm going to
yeah,
go banger with that one, actually.
you
I
would
think
you?
I have to. Sorry. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's only one Interceptor and only one Max Rockatansky, so
Well, that's
yeah,
true.
he sort of falls down there. But hey, 10 out of 10 for effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure it
Yeah.
was cheaper.
Well, it would be, yes. Yeah, probably cheaper than remaking another Mad Max film, that's it as
Yeah.
well. Any more spots from this week?
No, that'll do really. But I tell you what, what I have seen several of is micras. Now, micras are definitely bangers.
Mm.
I saw a very, very, again, very well used one with somebody in the driving seat who looked a bit like me, actually. And so it was, and it just made the point that series. I can't remember what the series is called now, but it's a Mark II micro basically, and they've got amazing engines which will go on forever. And I used to know someone who used to take the engines out of them because they used to put them in grass track minis. You could put the 1.3 in a grass track mini; it would go faster than it did with an A series.
Right.
But yeah, providing they're not rusted to bits, those are cars that will last pretty much forever.
Is that the Noddy
Um,
one that looks like a Noddy car?
yeah, pretty
Oh
much. Yeah,
God,
yeah.
no,
Oh
no,
yeah,
horrible, horrible. I drove one once. I drove one for about 400 miles once. I vowed never to get in one again. It was
yeah,
appalling to drive in the motorway.
yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it was poor. Occasionally, I'd hire a car and save the mileage on my own one. I think it was a Fiat Punto on the way down, which I really enjoyed.
Mm,
It was better when you got off the motorway. It was really good in A roads, full of pep, full of vim. Then got a micro on the way back, and it was awful. But it was better than the bus, I suppose.
yeah.
Just about. Anyway, talking of cars from the past, as we always do, we
Mm.
have a challenge this week, don't we?
Do we?
I think we
Have I
do.
forgotten about it?
No, you haven't. No,
Oh,
that's a nice try, but you did mention
yeah.
Golf GTI
Oh,
Mark
did
II.
I? Well,
Yeah, and you let the cat out of the bag.
yeah.
So, yes, I do pay attention. Sometimes. The challenge is, of course, is to be able to try and find the most interesting hot hatch with an MOT for less than £10,000, which is not as easy as you might think, as it turns out. Anyway, I think we know what yours is going to be, so tell
Do
us
you?
all about it.
Right. I don't know. I don't know how you could possibly tell that, David. But oddly enough, I did find one. Well, I've been writing something else for someone else. I do apologise. I know I do work exclusively for Bangers and Classics organisation, but I have had to write something else for someone else, and I have been looking at a lot of golfs, and I went into older golfs, and yeah, there was a GTI 8 valve in Scotland, and it was £4,000 in white. It did need a bit of work, but for £4,000, it didn't seem half bad. But I found very close to me is actually in Suffolk, so it isn't that far to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chap with two GTIs, and one is priced at 12,995, and then but the interesting one for me anyway is priced at 7,995. The more expensive one doesn't interest me. It's a big bumper one, and they've converted it to G60 specification, so it's not really very original anymore. It's
No.
been sort of ruined, I think, in a way. But the 7995 Golf GTI is Atlas Grey. I had several Atlas Grey ones, so it brings back happy memories. It's an 8 valve. I prefer those to the 16. And it looks quite tidy, and it's sort of temptingly priced, really.
All right.
I would have to make room. I'd probably have to, one vehicle would have to go out in order for this one to come in. But in a way, I drove them for so many hundreds of thousands of miles back in the day. I don't think there would be any point in me driving one. But they are fantastically useful and practical cars. You can get an immense amount into them. And they will just go on and on and on forever, really.
All right.
And yeah, for me, that's the best. I do like a bit of German, David, but I'm
Mm.
sure you've gone French, but I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, the fellow that's selling this Golf, it's not Arthur two GTIs Jackson, is it?
No, it could be, couldn't
It
it?
could be. Yeah.
He turns up every week, doesn't he?
Well, he does now. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Well, I tried to look for something a little bit different, and I thought I'll go Italian. I looked for an Uno Turbo. Nope. One of the sporty Stradas. Nope. I thought, really offbeat. A Y10 Turbo. Nope. And the Delta HF Turbo. I found a nice Delta GTIE, but it was in Greece, I think. So that wasn't on the cards. And then I thought, well, let's have a look, see what Renaults there might be. And to my delight, I found something I've long coveted, because I used to have one. It was a Renault 1916 valve, 3-door hatch, phase 1 in sports blue. That is the one to have. It's the right colour, it's the better phase 1 shape, and this one had the cloth interior. It was identical to the one I used to own back in the day. Absolutely gorgeous. 61,000 miles, MOT to March of next year. And it's had to have been restored, said the ad. It's definitely had some welding done, judging by the MOT history, but it looks good in the photographs. The shell looked good, the engine bay looked nice, and the interior looked very good. And these are great cars. They were regarded actually as being better than a Golf GTI back in the day.
Really?
Yep. I have an issue of Performance Car where it says that on the very front cover. Best GTI.
What did Performance Car know?
Well,
me.
yeah, they knew that much. That's the one thing they got right. I mean, everything else they might have got wrong, but absolutely. Looked better on the Golf, drove fantastically, stuck to the road like glue. Again, very practical. You had the 3 doors, obviously. You could get 5-door versions, I believe, in France. Possibly they came here later, but initially it was just 3 doors. But, you could get lots of stuff in them. And just fantastically practical, fun cars to drive. And I think they look great too. I mean, mine looked so good it got stolen one night, but we'll not go into that. I got it back.
Did you say
And
what the price was, David?
I didn't. I'm just about to.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes, the price is £9,495, and I suspect there might be some room for negotiation there. Obviously, that's up to the seller, but I would be tempted under other circumstances. I would be sorely tempted. But having just bought something else, as you know about, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not tempted this time. But if I had seen that, say 3 weeks ago, might be a different story. So that's the challenge. Listeners, if you've got an opinion of which is the more interesting of the two classics, one the Golf that James found, or the 1916 valve that I found, then let us know. And obviously, it's a 19. Let's be honest, but
Well, yeah, no, it's the Golf, isn't it?
We've got to pay
There
lip
you go.
service to it.
Yeah.
Well, you don't see. There are very few of them around, James, and to find one in good condition is really, really hard. It's quite sad, really, because of the forgotten classics. You see lists of best GTIs in magazines, and they always forget it. And you mention them, oh, we forgot about that. Well, how could you? Obviously, never driven one. Because, I mean, I swore by mine. Only occasionally swore at it.
Yeah.
Mostly swore by it back in the day. And, yeah, it was a fantastic car. And, if there's one car probably I could have from the past that I'd still have, if I was allowed to, that would certainly be a strong contender to be that car. That's how good it was. Anyway, on that note, we shall take a very quick break. This is Bangers and Classics. presented by James Ruppert and David Malloy, the guys with as much style as a pair of 1970s curtains. Well, having negotiated the break safely, I hope, it's time for this week's banger or classic. And we've gone British this week, and I really don't know what the decision's going to be in this one. Is it a banger or a classic? Because the car we're talking about is the Austin Maestro, and I think that Mr. Ruppert is the man to give us a lowdown on it.
Oh, I don't know about that. It was built, yeah, it was from 1983. Is when it came out, I believe.
Hmm.
And in a way, it was a decent bit of packaging. It was, in some ways, Leyland going back to the BMC old days with Isagonis, who knew how to package things. So there was plenty of room, lots of glass in it, nice and light. I think the styling, as you would agree, probably left a lot to be desired. It could have been, if it had been marketed properly and built better and so forth. It could have been a golf, really. It could have been a proper golf rival, but it never really was. It was, sort of a curiously British oddity in a way. And strange enough, it did actually get a golf gearbox. I think when they got the bigger engine in it, S series engine, it did actually have a VW Golf gearbox. So that was probably the only good part about it. But I'm sure people have got lovely tales of, their mum or dad probably had one, and it was a decent family car. But really, it wasn't terribly exciting. I don't think people think that fondly of it, and I just think it was a fairly forgettable car, which could have done better. But compared to a Princess or an Allegro or something, it was several million times better. But the thing is, I don't know what the final production figures were, but I don't think they got anywhere near a million. I think they got in the high sort of 700,000 um, amount of production, but I don't think it was in the millions, and that's what you need a car to do. I think in order to become something that's fondly remembered, or at least making money. But I wonder what you think of it, David.
Yeah, pretty much what you think to a large extent. I
Mm.
remember when it came out, I was first year at university and I had an accident. I went down to live with my uncle down in Hillingdon, which is just outside Uxbridge. And I can remember one day my injuries had healed and I got the tube train back from London, got off at Long Lane in Hillingdon, and there was a quite nicely inset in a sort of row of shops, little Austin Rover garage, and walked past it, and the Maestro had just been released, and all sorts of balloons, etc., and celebrations. I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm not sure this is going to be a big hit. It just, even then, it just looked a little bit dumpy.
Mm.
Um, in many ways, it wasn't a bad car though, because comfortable car to sit in. It was a roomy car, and it was reasonably affordable. I mean, those are all good things for families. You don't want to spend too much. You want a car that's comfortable, and you want something you can get your knickknacks in and what have you. Unfortunately, it just wasn't quite good enough, to compete against the likes of the Golf or, the best of the other opposition. And I mean, they brought in, if you remember, the Van den Pla version and
They
the
did,
MG
yeah.
version with the speech synthesizer.
It talked at you, yeah.
Yes, right, yeah. It was a New Zealand actress, Nicolette Mackenzie,
That's right.
did the voice for that, and I think it drove people up the wall. And
Yeah,
so much so that it didn't last very long before being dropped as a feature. And then the MG Maestro had another problem. They had rushed it into production with the R series engine, and it was prone to overheating problems, as I recall it. And they very rapidly changed that for the S series. And eventually got it right. They put I think it was the O series 2 litre in it,
mm.
and it became a much, much better car. And they eventually brought out, of all things, a Maestro MG Turbo. You think it's not going to work, but it did. It still didn't look great. You couldn't do much with that styling. You could put add-ons onto it, etc. You could put all sorts of accoutrements on it, but it just looked almost a little bit frumpy. However, it went like a bat out of hell. Cornering wasn't quite so good, but I mean, it was comfortably faster than most hot hatches back in the day. So there was something to be said for that. Unfortunately, they waited so long to bring it out. It was almost into the 90s before they did it. They should have brought it out in about 86 or sooner, and it could really have made a much bigger impression. And perhaps that's the story of British Leyland, isn't it?
Mm.
They had good ideas some of the time, and the execution wasn't always great, but often they delayed far too long before putting things into production. And by the time they got there, the opposition had stolen the march on them. And to a degree, I think that's the case with the Maestro.
Yeah.
Um, with better styling, it would have sold better, I think, for a
Yeah.
start. The build quality was never the best, and there's lots they could have done about that, but unfortunately, it didn't really happen. And, well, the rest of it was just down to buying public. Do we like this car? Do we fancy it? And quite a few people did, but
Mm.
unfortunately, not enough did to really, make the company as viable as it ought to have been.
No.
But do I dislike the Maestro? The answer is no, I do not dislike the Maestro. There was an incident where I had to wear a Maestro tie to a nightclub I've written about somewhere. It's a long story, which I won't go into. But suffice to say, we didn't even get into the nightclub. Um, possibly because of the garb we were wearing, but that's another tale. I'm hesitant to call it a banger because I feel a bit sorry for it. Whether it's a classic, I'm not sure. I'm going to sort of leave it in the hinterland saying, perhaps one day it will be regarded as a classic. Compare what it was to what we're getting now, it actually probably is quite good. If you look at it in those terms, James.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree. And again, it's another disappeared model.
Yeah.
In that, the last time I saw one, I really couldn't begin to imagine.
Yeah. And it was a British car, and again, that's got to count for something.
Yeah.
Bangers and Classics being the patriotic podcast that it is.
Well, absolutely.
So I think we'll say it's somewhere in the middle ground at the moment.
Yeah.
But we're possibly inching towards calling it a classic, perhaps.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I'll go along with you on that one.
Okay. Maestro, yeah, I think we've covered that, so we shall move on to another topic. That is, we've had some good news, James, haven't we, this week?
Oh, wow.
We have. We've had a call from an anonymous benefactor.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
Saying we're such fantastically nice gentlemen. He really doesn't know us, does he? That he's prepared to allow us unlimited funds to buy any car from any film of our choice, and we can have it. But we have to say on the podcast what car we want him to buy for us and why we want it. And again, I think you probably are well placed to kick off with this one.
Do you think so?
I always think so. Yeah, when it comes to being lazy, yeah.
Really?
I'll let you go first. That's it.
Well, there's only one car, David, that would actually fit in with our brand, and also be.
We have a brand.
Fit in with our brand. Well, we're going to have a meeting about that later, aren't we? Get all the corporates involved. Yeah, there is only one car that you could possibly want if you were going to buy a film car. There is only one legend that is the Withnail and I Jaguar Mark II 2.4. Obviously the best film ever made, and featuring the best stunt vehicle in it. It was a marvelous, iconic sort of Jag. In a way, it represented the time very well. I suppose it was, what Withnail was, the faded glory, of a classically trained actor, and that was basically a rusty old Jag. So, Jags start off as, the sort of car that people want, and they go down the pecking order as they get older, and then they go from banger to classic, and that's why it's very appropriate for us. And it was a very clever sort of car to use in the film. The film was set, I think, in 1969, and actually, I mean, I think the actual car was a 1961. You wouldn't have thought it would disintegrated that much, but actually, cars used to quite quickly. And maybe they might have had something a bit more 50s, maybe a Mark One, but we could, pick at that all day long. But it was a very good vehicle to have in the film. It did represent that, you could buy a Jag for, a $5 or something, and it would just be a lovely way to get around, and a marvelous way to go on holiday, either by accident or by design. So that's what I would do, David. I'm hoping then that Jag will be delivered next week, and I can come up and see you for a holiday.
Jolly good. I can imagine. I mean, I've often thought of you as Withnail.
Yeah.
In terms of the wine thing, what was it? We demand the finest wines known to humanity. We demand them here, and we demand them now.
That's right.
Yes. You being a chap who drinks wine, and me being someone who, doesn't really.
Well, there you go.
Only use it in cooking, old boy. Only use it in cooking. But
But now, I mean, I'm very excited to find out, what car you would pick, David.
Oh no, you've absolutely trumped me. I'm not even sure I'll bother with this now because that's such a good choice.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that. I thought maybe you would go for Uncle Monty's Rolls Royce. I think it was a Rolls Royce, or was it a Bentley? I can't remember.
I can't remember now.
No.
I've got the film somewhere on DVD.
Yeah.
I'll have to take it down and watch it. It's a really, really good film, very entertaining and very quotable. It's a cult film, but it's definitely, if you get into it, you'll love it forever, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, I went for something from a film that was made about 3 years earlier, and it's quite a tacky, rubbishy sci-fi film. You'd expect no less from me, of course.
Absolutely.
And it's a film called Wraith. It's a 1986, a sort of sci-fi horror, not really very horror film, but it stars Charlie Sheen. The Wraith, a character he played in the film, had a car called the Turbo Interceptor, and it's a low-slung, streamlined coupe that's powered by, who knows what. It's no earthly power. But you might think, made specially for the film. Actually, not. The only thing is, most of the ones you see in the film are actually just shells on top of buggies. You look at the rear suspension, etc., and the underframe, and it's basic as heck. But the real car, which appears only briefly in it, was a Dodge M4S. Well, the M4S owes its existence to a company called PPG, who then sponsored the kart series, the American Champ Car racing series of the 80s. And during that time, they worked with manufacturers and they produced prototypes and modified cars to act as pace cars at races. Well, Dodge had their turn, and it wasn't a modified car, it was a unique car, it was a bespoke car. It was a space frame chassis, mid-engine, with a 2.2 litre Chrysler turbocharged engine and a drag coefficient of 0.236, would you believe? 440 horsepower, absolutely flew apparently. And it was a pace car at several IndyCar races, as well as being in the Wraith. Still exists to this day. It's just very swoopy, somewhat gorgeous to my eyes. Other people may disagree, and that's why I've chosen it.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I think you made me watch the trailer at some point during our relationship, David. You said you must watch the trailer, and it did seem to be quite an awful film, but obviously worth watching for the vehicle.
And if you like Cheryl and Fenn, young Cheryl and Fenn, it's also worth watching
Oh, really?
for that. Yes.
Oh, right.
Yes, I won't say any more than that before I land myself in trouble.
Mm.
More trouble that is, obviously. I'm already in trouble after the first segment of today's podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll take another short break there. You're listening to Bangers and Classics, the only podcast that's visible from outer space. We're back after that short break, and now we're going to move into the world of motor racing. And James and I are going to talk about the driver that we think was the greatest driver we've respectively ever seen. I'll kick this one off. And anyone who knows me knows that this is going to be a very obvious choice, and that driver is Gilles Villeneuve. I actually was lucky enough to meet Gilles Villeneuve when I was a kid and get his autograph. That's not why I rated him, of course. I rated him because he could do things that other drivers simply couldn't do. There were so many tales of him about his brilliance. I'll give you a few. In Monaco 1981, he was driving a turbocharged Ferrari, which had absolutely no downforce. It was described by many people, including Gilles and even the guy who designed it, Harvey Postlethwaite, as a 7-letter word. The last 3 letters were B, O, and X, so you can imagine what the rest of it was. And he stuck this particular bleep box Ferrari on the front row of the grid at Monaco. His teammate, Didier Pironi, who was a very, very fine driver himself, could qualify no higher than 17th. And that wasn't a fluke. There were other days when Villeneuve was just so far ahead of everybody. Watkins Glen in 1979, there was a wet practice session, and most of the teams didn't even bother going out. It was so wet. However, the 2 Ferraris of Villeneuve and Jody Scheckter, his teammate, went out, and Scheckter went out, drove the wheels off his Ferrari, came back into the pits and thought, nobody could have went faster than me. And then he saw Villeneuve's time in the same car, in the same conditions, and Villeneuve was just shy of 10 seconds a lap faster. Think about that, 10 seconds.
Goodness me.
So, 10 seconds around the Nürburgring is one thing, 10 seconds around Watkins Glen is quite another. And there were other great days. There was the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, the same year, 79. Everybody remembers that he spun off and drove back to the pits in 3 wheels. They forget that before that, he passed Alan Jones in the Williams, which was a far superior car and far better downforce than the Ferrari of Villeneuve's. Villeneuve passed him round the outside of a hairpin for the lead of the race. You can watch it on YouTube, and it's a spellbinding bit of driving because, again, Jones was no mug as a driver, and the Williams was a superior car. And the only reason Gilles spun off in that race was a puncture he didn't know he had. He also had things like when he had an uncompetitive car in 1980, some of the things he did in it. And in France, one of my favourite stories about him was his car was terrible. I mean, really, I think Jody Scheckter scored 1 point finish all season, the reigning world champion in it. Villeneuve did a bit better and had the car at the sharp end, in days a few times, and when he really shouldn't have done. In France, though, it was hopeless, and he pulled into the pits halfway through the race for a new set of tyres. And in those days, the pit exit at Paul Ricard, there were two pit exits, and there was one which had the humpback section. And again, you can see this in a video on YouTube. There's some in-car footage with Eddie Cheever driving the Renault in, I think, testing. But Villeneuve went over that exit on the way out the pits. He had no chance of getting points. I think he was seventh, but he had the car airborne leaving the pits over the humpback bridge because he just drove the wheels off it. He knew one way to drive, that was flat out. Canada 81, torrential downpour in a car that had no downforce to start with. Its designer said it may be a quarter of the downforce of likes of the Williams or the Ligier or the Brabham. But Villeneuve finished third in a car that lost its front wing. He had absolutely no front downforce whatsoever. And again, you've got to watch it to believe it. It's sensational driving. And he just performed at a level far in excess of even the likes of Lauder, Prost, Arnoux, Scheckter, De Angelis, Mansell, Piquet, Andretti, all of whom he raced against, and all of whom rated him. And he was also a driver of great honour. He could have won the championship in 79. He effectively lost it for the want of a litre of fuel. And I wrote an article about that season somewhere on the web. I'll maybe put a link to it on the Bangers and Classics page because it is worth reading, not because I've written it, but because it tells the story of a brilliant, brilliant driver. But he could have won the championship still. They went to Monza late in the season, and there was an agreement between the Ferrari drivers and Villeneuve. All he had to do to put himself in pole position to win the championship was pass his teammate. He sat behind him the whole race and would not dream of attempting to pass. Not because he couldn't pass, but because he'd given his word, and that meant something to him. And he was also a very clean driver, as Alan Jones, who was, very, very stereotypical Australian. He spoke his mind, which was great. And he really respected Villeneuve. He said, hard guy to race against, but he said, if you got alongside him, he would never give you maybe a foot more than you needed, but he would never give you a foot less. I mean, that to my mind is everything you need from a great Grand Prix driver. He was spectacular, he was fast, he was brave, maybe a little bit too brave, he was honourable, and he was fair. And that's a combination, to my mind. Really, you can't surpass that. What do you reckon, James? Who's your favourite?
Well, I would say what you said there is extremely good. I cannot top that at all, and all the points you make about Gilles Villeneuve are absolutely spot on. Strangely enough, I was at the 1997 British Grand Prix when Jacques Villeneuve won that, and I think at the end of that season he was actually world champion.
He was,
and yeah, I suppose he would. I don't think everybody thought he was the same chip off the old block, but
no.
He could still drive. So there you go.
Yeah. He wasn't in the same class as his father.
No.
However, he did put the Villeneuve name in the World Championship trophy. And, he was a good driver in his own right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to... it's tough for someone like that coming...
It is,
trying to follow someone, Gilles' stature. It's very, very tough indeed.
Yeah.
And Jacques was his own man, which was the best thing he could be.
Of course, that's right. Absolutely. And we've sort of agreed off air that actually also one of the best, certainly one of the best British drivers, if not one of the best ever, was Graham Hill, because he excelled in so many disciplines of racing. We've talked about this before. He came to racing late, and he was just what you thought a racing driver should be, really. From the cut of his jib to the way he drove. But for me, oddly enough, the driver I sort of miss is a chap called Will Hoy. I don't know if you're familiar with him, David.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah,
saw him drive, yeah.
Yeah. I was very lucky enough. I did interview him at some time in the 90s. And he was just an extremely nice chap. I've interviewed racing drivers over the years, and I think some of them just thought, well, I'm not going to talk to another journalist, am I? I've got to get this over and done with as soon as possible. But he was such a nice chap. He was so, he was very funny. And he was smiley, and maybe he was having, a great day, and I didn't spoil it for him. But he was extremely pleasant, and I just thought, yeah, he's the sort of driver. Again, another one that we don't sort of have, but the BTC sort of series certainly, threw up characters
Hmm.
and people who could drive. Yes, I mean he was champion in the BMW M3. I think I spoke to him when he was driving for Ford, and that was probably towards the end of his career. But he also drove for Renault as well, didn't
He
he?
did, yeah.
Yeah,
He certainly drove a Renault. I think it was a privately entered one.
yeah,
I remember seeing him drive that car actually.
mm,
It wasn't very well funded, unfortunately, and
no,
it didn't really do justice to his ability. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Will Hoy, you had the likes of John Cleland as well, Steve
yeah,
Soper.
mm,
You had Joachim Winkelhock, whose brother raced in Formula One, Manfred Winkelhock.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, you had some great characters in the BTCC,
mm.
and you go further back, of course, Jerry Marshall.
Oh yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
how could you mention the BTC? How could you even talk about the BTCC or the BSCC as it used to be, without
Yeah,
mentioning Jerry Marshall? Now, there was a guy
yeah,
who was full of fun,
mm.
a character with a capital C, but a terrific racing driver. There were some really terrific characters around, and that was at that level in Formula One too. You had great characters. And sport becoming, shall we say, more professional and more corporate has meant we've lost a lot of that. And so, finally, you're eating your prawn sandwich and thinking, well, the facilities are really good.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, maybe we should bring the Bangers and Classics Racing series, where driving ability is not required; it's sheer personality and
Hmm.
whether your car is characterful or not.
Well, I think we could drive. Well, I think we go for the full Monty because these guys could drive too. You know, um, we should start the campaign for real racing, should we?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a song by Edmund Collins, wasn't it? Called "Campaign for Real Rock."
yeah,
Yeah, we'll do the campaign for real racing. Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, that's it. Go back to the old days. But yeah, I think the campaign for real racing would be fun. Bring it back. What are you going to drive, James?
I'm going to be driving the with an I Jaguar. So
All right.
as that's going to arrive on a transporter probably tomorrow, according to your benefactor. Yeah, I'm looking forward to driving that.
Well, I'm going to go down the lines of
Mm.
the KLF. I don't know if this is a true story, but this is what was reported to me some years ago that there was a sort of track day for pop stars and celebrities. It was run what you brought. It was a sort of photo opportunity, and the KLF turned up with an armoured car and no one would
Yeah,
go on track with them. Bill Drummond and
yeah,
Jimmy Cotty.
yeah.
I, I think, yeah, well, that'd be great fun, wouldn't it?
Well, that's
You
right.
don't have to get into the lead. You can qualify last, and when they come up to lap, you nerf them off. Last man standing.
Yeah.
Great
I
fun.
thought the most interesting thing about the KLoff, didn't they burn £1 million allegedly?
Yeah, that's right. They
Yeah,
did. Yeah, they did lots of strange things.
yeah, they did actually.
I mean, I think the KLF stood for Copyright Liberation Fund. Spelled
Yes, I think
copyright
it
with a
was.
K.
That's right. I do have that book actually, which I bought very cheaply many years ago, but now it's worth something like 300 quid or something.
Uh,
It's basically how to be a pop star
Yeah.
in 3 easy lessons or something.
Well, Bill Drummond was he was the manager of the Teardrop Explodes at one time, I think. But he also released a solo album, which I've heard definitely worth checking out. It's not like the KLF. I think there's country and western songs on it and all sorts from memory. But you know what? It's good fun. From the 80s, I can't remember the name of it, but if you see it, yeah, for a couple of quid, buy it. What are you going to lose?
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think, James, that's it for this week. I think we've covered all that we can for another week on the podcast. This is, of course, podcast number 27, and I mentioned Gilles Villeneuve earlier, and the racing number that's most associated with him is number 27. So how
Goodness me.
appropriate that we mentioned. Wasn't by
Mm.
design, just sometimes things work that way.
Well, these things happen for a reason, David. You know what I mean? There's higher powers at
Mm.
work here.
Well, there's a friend of mine
Yeah.
who believes there's no such thing as coincidences. He's not religious. He's not religious either.
No.
It's a strange philosophy he's got. I don't quite follow it, but he says things happen for a reason. There are
Yeah.
no coincidences, and perhaps he's right.
He could be right, actually.
He could be.
Yeah.
Then again, he could be wrong.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure he's right. Anyway, Thank you all for listening again this week, and hope you enjoyed it, and hope you'll join us again next week.
Yeah, that'd be great if you can. And yeah, I should have my Jag by next week, the Without an Eye Jag. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that going to happen, David?
What?
Isn't that going to happen?
I'm sure it is.
All right, fantastic.
And on that note, we're off. Cheerio.
All right, bye-bye.